Hello, everybody. Welcome to Medicine and Science on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Palavita. I'll be your host for today's show. And in this show, of course, we discuss everything that relates to medicine and science, including breaking news, which we're going to be discussing today because there's new developments in the world of medicine and science all the time. So I want to thank our listeners in the United States of America and around the world. And we're going to bring in our subject matter expert, who's actually a medical doctor, unlike the person in the United States who heads Health and Human Resources, who is not a medical doctor. This person is board certified in internal medicine, and he's going to bring us an update on what's going on, some of the breaking news and developments relating to the medical area. So with that, our favorite and fearless leader, Dr. Michael Patmos. Dr. Michael Patmos, your cult following is waiting to listen to you about the latest developments in medicine and science, because we well know it's really difficult to get good information. It's easy to get misinformation. So we're waiting for the good information.
Well, good morning, everyone. Again, I am far away from the United States right now, so I apologize for my casual attire. But where I am, I didn't bring any fancy clothes, so this is the best I can do today. So anyhow, I have two important things to talk about today. One is a very significant study that was published just the other day by BMC Communications, and it had to do with a 5-year, it was a retrospective cohort population-based study that looked at 250,000 people over in New York City over the duration of the COVID, pandemic, and it looked at seropositivity for COVID, for SARS-CoV-2, and looked at multiple demographic factors as to what, contributed to being seropositive, how many people were seropositive and what were their demographics. And the study showed very clearly that seropositivity was statistically more likely in the unvaccinated as opposed to the vaccinated. Now, this is important because nobody argues against the fact that the COVID vaccine saves lives. Everyone agrees with that. Even the MAGA critics agree that the vaccine saved lives, millions of lives. The congressional subcommittee that was led by Republicans, their COVID committee, concluded that the vaccine undoubtedly saved millions of American lives. And the data around the world is many, many millions more. No one can challenge that. No one disagrees with that. Clearly, the vaccine saved millions of lives. The other thing that's irrefutable, or has been irrefutable, is that the vaccine prevented severe disease, ending up in ICU, on a ventilator, on dialysis, on ECMO, near death, that kind of critical, catastrophic train wreck of a ICU experience, clearly reduced by vaccination. We know that. So death, severe critical illness, and hospitalization, the data is consistent and irrefutable, and no one challenges it, that the vaccine clearly reduced those bad outcomes. Now we have data from this new study that showed that in addition, the vaccine did in fact reduce the likelihood of getting the disease at all. Seropositivity. Seropositivity doesn't mean you're clinically ill. It means that you just test positive or nasal swab positive for the virus. What they found was that the vaccine clearly reduced that. So we now know the vaccine reduces infection, reduces severe disease, reduces death and hospitalization. That's fact. If you don't agree with it, then you're just ignoring the facts. So anyhow, that was that study. Now I want to go on to something even more, I think, more important. As you know, Robert F. Kennedy uses methylene blue, and he was observed on an airplane dropping this blue dye into a drink when his shaky hand was dropping the methylene blue. Well, Dr. Robert Malone wrote an article that was published on his Substack. It's called Malone News. If you just go to Malone News, you'll pull up his Substack, and you can scroll through his articles or search for his article on methylene blue. And he wrote an article on methylene blue and on Robert Kennedy that I found absolutely astonishing for a couple of reasons. And I want to tell you about them. First of all, in his article, he talks about the fact that that the medical profession, the pharmaceutical industry, and the federal government are all involved in a giant tripartite conspiracy to control the population and to sell vaccines and drugs and treatments that are unnecessary. So he says that the entire system is corrupted and that what you have is a conspiracy between the health community, the medical profession, pharmaceutical industry, and government are all conspired against you, the individual. And that because of that, there's a new thing that he's recommending called biohacking. Biohacking is do-it-yourself healthcare. And he says in his article, you are your own best doctor, that the best doctor you will ever meet is you're looking at him in the mirror. And he advocates, actually comes out and advocates that people should experiment on themselves with medications, prescription medications, non-prescription medications, over-the-counter medications, supplements, herbs, all sorts of things. He comes out and encourages people to self-experiment. And he describes how he does this with his wife and how their health has dramatically improved. And in the course of this thing where he talks about biohacking and just experimenting on yourself, he talks about methylene blue, which is what one of the things that Robert Kennedy uses. And he goes on to explain about how methylene blue was, initially just a dye, and it has one clear-cut medical indication, that is the treatment of methemoglobinemia. But then he goes on to say it's a remarkable thing that treats Lyme disease and infections, and he gives a whole laundry list of things for which he says methylene blue is effective. What's amazing is if you look in the medical literature, there's one disease for which methylene blue is clearly established, and that is methemoglobinemia. The other role for it is in medical imaging, where it's used, for example, when they do sentinel node mapping in breast cancer, they inject some of this blue dye into the lymph vessels, and it shows you where the lymphatics track, and you can tell where the lymph nodes are that need to be removed, that sort of thing. It's also used in medical imaging to image like a fistula, for example. If you have a fistula from your intestine to the abdominal wall, you can inject a little blue and the blue ink, and it comes out. You can see where the connections are. That's it. Those are the only established, approved uses for methylene blue. Everything else is unapproved and just woo-woo medicine. Well, in his article on methylene blue and do-it-yourself biohacking, Dr. Malone recommends that people take methylene blue. And if you read through his paper, he gets to the point where he says, and now here's the dosing recommendations. And he's about to give specific dosing recommendations when he says, you go to page 2 and pay me. So in order to get his dosing recommendations, you have to buy a subscription to his Substack, which is charging for medical advice. So I didn't obviously go to page 2 because I'm not going to pay him one penny, but I think it's interesting that he not only advocates for methylene blue for all kinds of things, including Lyme disease, and then says, if you want my dosage recommendations, you must get a subscription and pay me. And then you can get the dosage recommendations. I believe that giving medical advice for a fee is called practicing medicine. Now, it's important because Dr. Malone is a licensed physician in the state of Maryland. He's not licensed anywhere else, and he's only legally allowed to practice medicine within the confines of the state of Maryland. On his Substack, he's giving advice to everyone around the world and potentially collecting income from everybody around the world to get his specific advice. So he's practicing medicine globally when he's only licensed in one small state. The other thing the other thing about it is that this clearly violates the Medical Practice Act. The Medical Practice Act in any state, including the state of Maryland, requires that doctors only prescribe information or prescribe treatments that are based upon solid evidence. We cannot just prescribe things or recommend things out of the blue. We're supposed to base our recommendations on well-established principles of science and medicine and published information. None of that pertains to methylene blue. So it's clearly a digression from the standards of the Medical Practice Act. But here's where it gets really interesting. Here's where he said something that just caught my attention, and I want to read to you his words, if I can find them exactly. Well, here's what he basically said. He said that it is his opinion and in his perspective that what we should be striving for is equality of health opportunity, not equality of health outcome, as is seen in public health. He dismisses the goal of the greatest good for the greatest number of people as a very bad thing pushed by public health. And he rejects that. And what he says is that we should be dealing with, as an individual, that your individual health is all that matters. You should maximize your own individual health by biohacking, and the heck with everybody else in population health and quality outcomes. We shouldn't be worrying about quality health for others, but we should just be focused on ourselves. That's his kind of libertarian perspective. I found this to be absolutely vile and repulsive, and it violates everything that medicine is based upon. If you look at the ethical and foundational principles upon which medicine is built, the Hippocratic Oath and the Oath of Maimonides, it's all about caring for others. That's what doctors do. Our mission is to improve the health of humanity, not just to improve my health or the health of the individual. Yes, we do strive to help the health of the individual, but we help humanity one individual at a time. It's all about helping humanity because of compassion and empathy for other fellow human beings. This is what medicine is predicated upon. The Oath of Maimonides refers to, there's a line, it says, I answer my calling to care for the living things. They're all products of the Creator. Hippocratic Oath says, whatsoever house I enter, I go for the benefit of the people. So treating humanity, public health outcomes is essential. It's what the basis of the medical profession is. And Dr. Malone, in his essay on methylene blue, completely disses that. He says, no, it's not about public health. It's not about the greatest good for the greatest number of people. It's about the individual. That gets back to a philosophical issue of utilitarianism, which is the greatest good for the greatest number of people, versus egoism, which is all about me. And so I think it's really repulsive for a physician to advocate against greatest good for the greatest number of people. I've interviewed hundreds, thousands of people for medical school admission and residency applications. If any applicant, when asked, why do you want to be a doctor, doesn't say, I want to be a doctor because I want to help humanity, to help eradicate disease and alleviate pain and suffering for humanity. If you don't say that on your interview, you're not going to get accepted. Well, here, Dr. Malone, who's now an official spokesperson for the United States, traveling all around Europe. He just addressed the Italian Senate the other day. He was in Great Britain recently. Here's a doctor from the United States who advocates unproven therapies, provides disinformation about vaccines, exaggerates his accomplishments and his credentials, and then comes out and says that public health, greatest good for the greatest number of people, is a bad idea, and you should reject that. I think that is just astonishing. It's just, to borrow one of his favorite words, I was gobsmacked by the fact that anyone would say that and come out and espouse such unethical and immoral thinking as that. I became a doctor because I want to help the health of humanity, not because I just care about myself. Anyhow, that's my talk for today, and hopefully you found it interesting and we can have a little conversation about it.
So I used methylene blue on and off for about 5 years because I am an idiot. Because about 15, 20 years ago, methylene blue was in clinical trials to see if it would walk back early Alzheimer's, because among the things it does is it can act as a detergent. And when you have Alzheimer's, your dying brain cells barf up sticky stuff called amyloid, and they thought maybe the methylene blue would break up the amyloid so it wouldn't kill the rest of your brain. I'm like, ooh, I want a clean brain. I'll start taking brain detergent, and it's very powerful. You take this stuff, and your piss comes out a deep green color because it dyes everything blue, and yellow piss plus blue dye equals green. And and anyway, 6 years ago, I got kidney cancer. Now, 40% of kidney cancers, they don't know what caused it. You're not a smoker, you're not a drinker, but I took a ton of methylene blue, which is potentially toxic. That contribute to my tumor? I don't know, but I was stupid to use this untested stuff.
Very good point. I neglected to mention that in Dr. Malone's article where he recommends methylene blue, he doesn't discuss at all any of the adverse effects of it and the drug interactions. Methylene blue has got a litany of drug interactions, the most important of which is anybody who takes SSRIs like Prozac and so forth, or MAO inhibitors, can die if they take methylene blue. It gives them a severe serotonin reaction. So he never mentions that at all. There's a whole bunch of people for whom methylene blue is absolutely contraindicated. And he should have mentioned that in his article.
Also, I got my methylene blue at the pet store where they sell it as stuff you add to your fish tank to keep fungus off your goldfish. And when you buy it from the pet store, that's not human grade purity. It comes probably from China, and it can have a bunch of heavy metal contamination. And I was just putting junk in myself.
You need to submit your Mensa membership for
Well, no, my
get that
You may have to give it up and everything like that. Hey, Dr. Patton, just really quickly, and kind of what Rick was talking about and everything, because as y'all know, I live in Durham, where Nick used to live at and everything. And of course, Duke University is here. And I have a number of friends that are also regularly and routinely, well, I'll say more acquaintances, doing clinical trials and everything like that. So I just wanted your take on the importance of clinical trials, because like I said, I've got a couple of acquaintances that I see on the bus that are routinely going for clinical trials for everything from the drugs to fit to more medical drugs. So I just wanted your take on the use of human research and everything like that and clinical trials.
That's the only way we really know what works. Clinical trials are very important. We have established an effective treatments for a lot of things that we know from previous trials that we use. But then we run into situations where a patient has a condition and we don't have an effective treatment, or the treatments we have are no longer working. What do you do then? What do you do with the patient who's got an advanced renal cell cancer or some other bad disease, mitochondrial disease or something, or some other, difficult disease, and we don't have any well-established treatment for it? Well, the options there are people either wing it and just try stuff out of the blue, like Dr. Malone says, be your own doctor, experiment on yourself. Or you look for clinical trials. Clinical trials are the way that science and medicine advances. Clinical trials are run in major academic medical centers. They're structured. They have placebo groups, control groups, and blah, 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 and all the proper designs to get a meaning, so the results, if there are any, will be statistically meaningful. That's how we advance our knowledge. It is through clinical trials that we have come to find new treatments like the immunotherapies that are now extending life for many patients with cancer. If we don't have clinical trials, then people are doing what Malone suggests, which is just self-experimenting. You have no control group. There's no
that makes sense.
group.
But Dr. Pat, the flip side of that, and I just hear hand rake and everything like that, is that sometimes, and I know that on this network we talk about finances and financial health, but I do know that sometimes, and this is where I get worried, people are using clinical trials as a means to improve their economy, because there are a number of times that people will be given asked to get paid a certain amount of money in order for the clinical trials, and then you have people that are going not so much for the science, but they're going to make the extra money in order to survive, and that's where I sometimes wonder about.
Right. So there are good clinical trials, and when I was unemployed, I'd get writing jobs, and then I'd go be a guinea pig in these crappy clinical trials where they needed healthy volunteers, and they would try stuff. Like one time they gave me like a blood pressure medication, and then I had to masturbate to see if the blood pressure medication came through in my sperm or some stuff. And then I went to one, yeah, and the crappy clinical trials don't necessarily hire the best doctors. One guy like examined my prostate and he nicked it, and then like I bled blood and freaked out, and so I mean, they're buyer beware on some of these clinical trials.
You are right. I was, my mind being an academic guy most of my life, I'm immediately thinking about the clinical trials you would find at places like University of California, San Francisco,
MD Anderson,
Stanford, UCLA, MD Anderson, Beth Israel, in Boston, those kinds of elite institutions. There is a little cult industry of clinical trials that are not high quality clinical trials. And you often will see people, enrolling in those things. So you see ads like, get paid, to be in a study on this or that or the other thing. Yeah, there is some of that goes on. The amount of money involved in that is kind of minimal. It's the sort of thing my rock star son would have from time to time have to like donate blood or be in a clinical trial or go to a sperm bank to try to make a few bucks. But you're not going to get rich on it. That's for sure.
And the doctors, imagine what has to happen to you as a doctor for you to work in one of these like clinical trial mills. You might not be the best doctor with the best history.
I guess you'd be the kind of doctor who says that public health really doesn't matter and it's all about, experimenting on yourself. Go ahead and
Dr. What is all this crazy conspiracy theory? I mean, I spent a lot of time with the Duke University. I did not see anything crazy, anything conspiracy. Their endowment's like $12 billion. It's not like any of these people need to make any money. I saw what I call very serious people doing serious research. So who comes up with these crazy conspiracy theories?
This notion of a conspiracy theory between doctors and pharmaceutical companies and the government has been around for a while. Robert F. Kennedy is one of the champions of this. He talks about this all the time. And Dr. Malone and Robert Peter McCullough, they also talk about it. But stop and think about this. I mean, this is a delusion. This is a very well-formed delusional system of a disturbed mind. If you think about it, how on earth, if you wanted to create a conspiracy between the entire medical profession, you're talking about all the doctors, all the hospitals, all the medical schools, all the medical infrastructure that we have, and all the drug companies that are all around the world, and the federal government, including CDC and FDA, and all these people are somehow behind closed doors and conspiring against the people. That is a delusional system. That's a paranoid delusion. And anybody who's clinging to that, that's really bizarre. And that's what underlies all of this, is this delusion that there's this grand conspiracy that the whole world is aligned against you, the individual, to make money off of you by forcing you to take a vaccine.
I think these people have some other mental issues. The other thing besides the conspiracy thing that really bothered me was licensing. Since I'm licensed to practice in Florida, people call me up all the time. Hey, can you handle this case? I said, I can't. Well, why not? Well, you're in Utah. I'm not licensed. Can you handle this case? I'm not licensed in California. Can't do it. That the bar associations are very strong at saying if you're not licensed in the state, you can't represent. What bothered me about your whole speech, it sounds to me that the medical profession is the same way. You need state licenses. And if he's offering medical advice without a license in those states, in some states in law, that's a very serious crime. They do not put up with that stuff. I don't know what it is in medicine, whether or not I can get a medical degree and just go ahead and practice in any state or not. But if you can't, this really bothers me because he ends up being an unauthorized practice of medicine, and what my research showed, this isn't a civil action, this is a criminal action. But again, like I said, that's not my level of expertise. I'll look into it now, but it's very bothersome because I know in law, you have to stay in your lane. You jump outside your lane, you're going to get run over. So anyway. That's my thoughts.
So there's a very old theory, a quack, insane theory that doctors have been able to cure cancer for 100 years. They just don't, because there's more money in not curing cancer. And A, it's stupid, and B, cancer is not one disease. Cancer is where your cells break in 4 or 5 different, your cells don't go from good to dangerous in one step. There's like 4, 5, 6 steps. And the steps are not the same for every cancer or for every person. So yeah, there's not one cure for cancer. And no, it's not some ridiculous frickin' conspiracy.
Hey, Dr. Patmos, is and this is, I know we're winding down, is RFK and this Dr. Malone and others, because I used to watch old shows like, as people know, because I had them on my show, Little House on the Prairie, and of course Gunsmoke, are they the new modern day version, the 2025 version of the snake oil salesman and all along those lines? So that's what they seem like. They seem like the modern day version of the snake oil salesman.
Yes, basically, yes. To answer your question in a nutshell, yeah, that's exactly what they offer. They sell false information. In some instances, like Dr. McCullough actually sells remedies and treatments that he's invented. And, you know, Malone is actually, in essence, he's selling methylene blue. He says right on in his article that if you want dosage recommendations, pay him and he'll give you a dosage recommendation. That gets back to Nick's question about where's your light. Physicians can only practice medicine. You know, what is the practice of medicine? It's the rendering of medical advice, and it's usually for a fee. Doctors can only do that in states where they are licensed. Dr. Malone is licensed in Maryland, in one state. I am licensed in 14 states. So I can practice medicine in 14 states. And I do that in my relationship with certain telemedicine vendors, where I'm an independent contractor. I practice medicine in multiple states, but only in the states in which I am licensed. Like, Rick, you're in California. I can treat you because I'm licensed in California. Nick, you're in Spain. I can't treat you. I'm not licensed in Spain. So you can only practice where you are licensed. To go online and say, I'm providing medical advice, I'll give you specific instructions on a prescription medicine, you have to pay me. And that person, the person you're talking to, may not be in the state in which you're licensed. You're practicing medicine outside your jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So an essential ingredient of modern snake oil, of modern medical fraud, and medical fraud throughout history is there's one magical substance that'll fix everything that's wrong with you. And our bodies are more complicated than that. Yesterday, I saw that they're announced in China that China is looking at a new drug that will get you to live to 150 because it's doubled the lifespan of mice. But mice are simpler than us. The average lifespan of a mouse is 2 years. It's easy to get an extra year for a mouse. But the deal is we evolved to live longer and longer. Our average lifespan is 80. Most of the shortcuts that might work on a mouse, we've already evolved to have, and it's hard to buy us extra life.
And well, you can in Spain, the average life expectancy is 84, where in the United States it's only 77.
Yeah, because we get shot, and we eat terrible food.
Part of the reason I moved to Spain, you live longer and prosper, but our show is not going to live any longer because we're out of time. So I thank our Dr. Michael Patmos, who is board certified in internal medicine, and we want to thank our viewers in the United States and, of course, around the world on Medicine and Science on the Pod TV network. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.